Welcome back to Think Like a Nurse 2. What we're going to be focusing on in this lecture is the difference between acute and chronic renal failure. So, in essence, they're all renal failures. One just is reversible, and that's your acute renal failure. That means reversible means that it can be reversed or can be corrected with therapeutic management. Chronic renal failure can lead to end-stage renal disease. And this is not reversible. Once the damage has been done to the kidneys, there is no turning back, so to speak, on that. Those kidneys are already damaged, and that is going to lead the client to either need peritoneal dialysis or hemodialysis that we've talked about in previous lectures. When we're looking at acute renal failure, of course, we're taking in mind those lab values that we talked about a couple of lectures ago. We're talking about the BUN, we're talking about the creatinine. And remember that I said when your BUN is elevated, and it's elevated alone without any change in your other lab values or any significant difference in your other lab values, that means that you are dehydrated and probably just need to have some fluids replenished to get that GFR back in check and to get the BUN back in check. So that is reversible. Okay, acute renal failure is reversible, and what we look at when we're looking at whether or not it's reversible, irreversible, is back to those lab values. Your BUN, your creatinine, your GFR, creatinine clearance, and we're looking at other types of labs. Your client's electrolyte status also is going to be very important, and that's in your CMP or BMP, your complete or comprehensive metabolic panel, and your basic metabolic panels. Those are going to give you some important information about the client's electrolyte status. What we look at as far as our terminology that we have to understand when we're talking about different kinds of renal failure is oliguria, and that means that the client is putting out less than 400 milliliters of urine in an entire 24-hour period. Okay, we said a normal, when we're talking about early on, a normal urine output would be no less than about 30 milliliters of urine per hour over the course of 24 hours. So we're looking at our volume being not less than 400 milliliters. If we have less than 400 milliliters of urine, that's going to mean that we have oliguria. If we have anuria, usually an A in front of a word in our medical terminology means that it's without. So that means that the client is going to be essentially without urine. The oliguria was the decrease. The anuria or anuria means that the client is going to be putting out less than 100 milliliters of urine over 24 hours. So that's a very, very insignificant amount of urine, and that means that the kidneys are not functioning at all. So when we see those things, we're looking more towards the chronic renal failure. This is what happens much later on. This one, acute, can be reversed or changed with therapeutic management, but once we reach the chronic stage, there is no turning back. So we can't go backwards this way, but we can move forward this way. So you can go from acute to renal, but you can't go from chronic back to acute. Once you've reached the chronic phase, you're there to stay. Okay, when we're looking at volumes of urine, sometimes a large volume of urine is what's called polyuria, and that's about 6,000 milliliters of urine that the kidneys are filtering and producing and putting out within a 24-hour period of time. And those excess volumes, we've learned in our previous endocrine disorders that increased and excessive amounts of urine could be an indication of diabetes insipidus or other problems. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at how much urine the kidneys are putting out, how well they're functioning. We're taking into account the specific gravity, and we're also looking very carefully at those particular lab values. Okay, when we look at our chronic renal failure, as we talked about, we said this is irreversible kidney damage. Okay, the kidneys are not going to be able to recover from the damage that's been done here. They're not filtering. This is absolutely permanent damage. Okay, we're looking at our lab value, a decrease in the GFR, or the glomerular filtration rate. We're looking at an increase in the BUN. Remember that we said above, between 80 and above on these clients is normal. So when we start looking at the end stages, we're looking at those levels falling below 30. They're getting significantly worse. Very, very poor function of the kidney. Your BUN, when it's elevated, we said by itself it could just mean dehydration, but you're looking at chronic elevations of your BUN, which is very, very high. We're also looking at an increased serum creatinine. That means that the poisons and toxins that should have been filtered out through the urine are being circulated back through the bloodstream. So therefore, instead of having a high urine creatinine, you're going to have an elevated serum creatinine because the kidneys weren't actually able to pull that out. Okay, these clients with chronic renal failure or end-stage renal disease have elevated blood pressures. Okay, in your renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, we're looking at the secretion of renin by the kidney to help maintain the blood volume and stabilize the blood volume, and therefore that's going to keep the blood pressure at a steady rate or at a constant. Well, when a client has kidney damage, due to chronic renal failure, trauma, whatever the occurrence has happened, then that's going to cause a signal in the rise of renin being secreted into the bloodstream to help pull or increase or raise the blood pressure. So these clients have chronic kidney damage, which means that as a result of the body and the processes that take place to maintain the blood pressure, these clients are going to be producing an excessive amount of renin, which is going to raise that blood pressure up really high. So these clients are going to have problems with chronic hypertension. Okay, anemia. These clients are very anemic, which means that the kidney should be stimulating or producing the hormone erythropoietin that's going to stimulate your bone marrow to make more of your red blood cells. Well, when this happens, when the kidney is chronically damaged, the hormone erythropoietin is not secreted in sufficient amounts, or maybe not even at all. So the clients that have chronic renal failure are going to have to be on medication, and erythropoietin injections, or a medication called Procrit. There are some others on the market, but that one just happens to be very familiar at the moment. So those medications are going to be given to help stimulate the production of the red blood cells. And we know in turn, when clients don't receive enough red blood cells, that's what your oxygen binds to, and that's how your organs and your body and brain are fed with those nutrients and oxygen, is through those red blood cells. So we can understand that these clients are going to have problems with cognitive thinking. They're going to have problems with their hematocrits and hemoglobin changes because of this anemia. And it becomes such a chronic problem that, unfortunately, after much treatment, we'll continue to see a progressive decline with these clients. Okay, what else we're looking at is pruritus. These clients are developing pruritus, or itchy, very dry, irritated skin, and that happens as a result of a uremic frost that occurs within the clients, or they will have a uremic frost on the skin, and that happens as a buildup in the serum uric acid levels, and that the body was not able to pull out the toxins and the ammonia excreted as waste in the urine, so it's being filtered back through the blood, and as a result of that, it's being excreted and comes up through the skin and actually shows as a uremic frost on the skin. So we know that these are very, very sick clients. They have a lot of problems with itching, a lot of skin problems. So when we're looking at our management of our clients with our chronic end-stage renal disease, we have to look at medications such as antihistamines that are not going to affect the blood pressure, but are going to help with maintaining and help preventing the itchy skin, trying to make their lives much more comfortable. Some of those medications are Atarax and Vistaril, and those are some medications that are used to help control the itching or the pruritus in the skin. Also, these clients will have severe pitting edema. They're going to have the fluid retention because they're not going to be able to pull off the urine and excrete the waste, so that it's going to be circulated back through the bloodstream. We're going to be looking at these clients having problems, we already said, with high blood pressure. They're also going to be at risk for developing CHF, or congestive heart failure, and in turn they're going to be at very high risk of developing pulmonary edema, because the fluid that the heart can't put back into the circulatory system to go out to the kidneys to be excreted as urine, is going to dump that into the lungs, and then we're going to have clients that are going to have extreme shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, and then just a continuous downhill progression. When we're looking at our clients with our acute renal failure, that means that through hydration, use of diuretics and other medications, antihypertensives, that we're going to be able to help these clients get their labs back in check. We're going to get that GFR back up. We're going to increase the function of the kidney. We're going to decrease their BUN after we get them hydrated, and then we're going to be able to manage what's going on. If they need the erythropoietin, then we'll be able to administer that and then get them back to health. But unfortunately, once they have reached this chronic renal failure level, they're at basically a point of no return. So if you need to go back and review our segment that we covered on peritoneal and hemodialysis, then please feel free to do so. But I hope through our lecture today that this has helped you to better understand the difference between acute and chronic renal failure. Thank you so much for joining.